everybody, and welcome to of Wharton. And we're thrilled to have our Israeli crew, Ronen Schwartzman, Wharton MBA 2004, with us today. Ronen, hi and welcome.
Thank you, Elena. It's wonderful to be here. I'm so excited to see you. It's been so long. And despite the Israeliness, I'm in New York since we graduated. So it's half American by now, I have to say.
Half American in terms of like informally, or in terms of how you feel. What do you mean by that?
In terms of my citizenship.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations!
I've been living in the U.S. now for almost 20 years, so almost half of my life here. So
wow,
feeling local.
Ronen, was it always the plan to stay? Did you want to go back?
Yeah, for me, that was the plan. For me, Wharton was my way to get to New York City and Wall Street. That was my dream. That was the vision. So I've been living the dream.
Oh, excellent.
So speaking of the dreams, can you tell us your origin story and what brought you to Wharton? And we know part of that was your dream of New York City. Was there anything else?
Yeah, of course. So I've been in the capital markets. I started in 1999, and I was a sell-side analyst working for Oppenheimer in Israel, covering Israeli tech stocks on NASDAQ. So I saw NASDAQ at 5,000 and then at 1,200. So these were great lessons. But I also learned that I want to do Wall Street from New York. That Tel Aviv is great. Tel Aviv is amazing and evolved a lot since I left in many great ways. But Wall Street is not in Tel Aviv. It's here in New York. So I was wondering what would be the best path for me to get to Wall Street and to continue my professional career. So MBA was kind of the path. So I applied to 5 schools. I got into Wharton, and that was a very easy decision where to go. And here I am. We graduated. I moved to New York in 2004, and I've been here since.
Wow. So it seems like you basically you had that in your mind. I want to go to Wall Street. You went to quite arguably the best school to get you to that position, and boom, there it is. I'm curious now, even a step further back in the origin, what made you so interested in financial or capital markets and finance? What initially got you into that path? And then also specifically, you did mention that New York has Wall Street and Israel doesn't have it. What is it about Wall Street that really attracted you?
Sure. So for me, it's kind of my personal side. So my father is an accountant. He runs his own practice. All my life, I grew up thinking I'm going to be an accountant till I'll be a CPA, and I'm going to join him and take over the office one day. So I went to undergrad in Israel. I had my major in accounting. And after the first semester, I started working with my dad in the office. So I used to work 5 days a week in the mornings, and I would study in the evening. And after a year of waking up at 6 a.m. and going to work every day, I started to feel, maybe this is not the right thing for me. I started feeling a little more passionate about investing in public markets, and it was more exciting. So as I describe it, accounting is, balance sheet, income statement. It's always backward looking, right? We look what happened on 12/31 of whatever year. Even though we're in April now, we're analyzing what happened. If you're an accountant, we're doing taxes in the United States, as you're, I'm sure, aware. Cutoff day was April 15th. So we always look backwards. And finance and investing is always forward-looking, right? So I was much more passionate about that, and that kind of piqued my curiosity. So not an easy decision for me, but I quit working with my dad. And instead of that, I left and I joined Oppenheimer. And I started covering, so I said I was a sell-side analyst, and I was talking to CEOs of all these public companies, and I was 24 years old, 25 years old. They were quoting me in all the local Israeli media news with all my coverage and price targets and all that
Wow.
fun stuff. And that was amazing. But Tel Aviv is a small country, This is, before all the hype of venture capital now and all the amazing innovation that's coming out of today, which was in really early stages back then. As I say, my passion was more on the public side. So for me to break out of that little bubble of Tel Aviv, then there's really thinking there's like two power centers in the world for finance. One is London, the other one is New York. So for me, New York, Wall Street was the easier decision.
Got it. No, that makes so much sense. Kind of having always the influence of accounting, I guess probably from a very early age, getting you into like I guess the financial business world, and then realizing. And also a follow-up question to when you were working with your father, were you working simultaneously with your studies, or did you work during the summer? Like, because I know that's.
Well, I work. So as I said, I work every day from 8 till 3, and then I drive an hour to school, and I study from 4 or 5 until 9 o'clock at night, and
Wow.
5 days a week.
That's what I thought you said, and I just wanted to make sure that our listeners picked up on that, because that is quite the grind, I would say. I mean, we definitely we're used to work hard, play hard, but oh boy, yeah. So how did your dad take it when you told him that you didn't want to work with the family business anymore?
Yeah. So a little bit to my surprise, I mean, he took it better than I expected. Like, clearly he was disappointed, but he also understood, I should follow my passion and the path that I want to create for myself. So yeah, he was very supportive.
That sounds like an ideal response to me. I mean, like, definitely I can see how he would want you to stay with him, because he's been doing it for so long. But to be supportive, I think that's the best thing you can do as a parent.
Yeah, I'm thinking back now, and not that I have kids, right? Because I came single to the U.S. But he it was like a double compromise on my parents and on my father. Like, for my father, was obviously, me not joining him in the business. But also I left the country. It's not like I said, all right, I'm not going to work with you, but I'm going to work, I'll do finance, in Tel Aviv.
Right.
I was like, well, I'm actually going to be, 10-hour flight away from you guys. So I was very lucky with my parents.
Well, it's not like you told him you wanted to be a tennis pro for a living or an artist. That could have not got it done
That's
as
right.
well.
That's very true. That's a very good point.
You told him basically that I want to make more than you ever did.
I don't know, more than he ever did, but it's kind of, I run my own business now, so you put your life into it, and I guess every parent is hoping, secretly, that the kids want to follow their steps and continue and grow it and kind of make it a generation over generation type of business.
Right.
So that's, I'm sure, disappointed him, but yeah, they're great.
Hey, Ronen, you make it sound so easy. I wanted to go to Wall Street, and Wharton seemed like a good path. I got in. Done.
Yeah.
But I am sure there was more than that involved.
No, of course, there was much more than that involved, as you know. We're the same class, right? I mean, when we got in, it was, right, we were started in 2002, graduated 2004. So when we were applying, U.S. was still in recession. I think, it was like, 6% acceptance rate or whatever for our class. I mean, there was a lot of hard studying for the GMAT and make sure we got good grades, and I worked many hours on our application and writing the essays. And I came to the U.S. before to tour the schools that not every applicant from Israel did. I came to the U.S. to interview for business school, and instead of doing it from Israel, kind of showing my commitment that I really want to do it. So it's definitely not as simple as as we're telling it now, 20 years later.
So for you and so I know that, and I'd love to kind of talk about the specific steps that you took along the way, but now you're running your own business. Is it a hedge fund?
No. So what I do, so I started my business, 10 Capital Advisors, back in 2009. So back then, right before I started, so I was a chief investment officer for a family office in New York, where I was responsible. We invested in different hedge funds. We made money in 2008. So you remember 2008, the S&P was down 40%, the hedge fund index lost 20%. So I guess I kind of found what I really enjoy about investing. So in '09, that family office I used to work for, they moved to London. So they asked me to join them in London. And I asked my wife's American. We had 2 little kids at home, so that was a very short conversation at home. Honey, I want to go to London. And she said no. I said, all right, great. What do we do? Let's start a business. So I started my business. And the family office was my first client. So when I started, the idea was to be the hedge fund, hedge fund advisory group for families. So think of it. So in '08, as I said, the markets, fell apart. Hedge funds lost a lot of money for the first time. A lot of families were invested in fund of funds, and those products that kind of worked until '08 basically failed in '08. And then so investors, lost money. They said they want to get out. And they put redemption requests, and then they heard, well, we're really sorry, but the hedge fund just gated. We can't give you back your money. And families were like, oh, well, what is a gate? Well, if you would read the PPM, the small fine print in the PPM, you'd learn that the hedge fund managers can't give you back your money. Or they were side pocketed. It's like, oh, what's a side pocket? Well, the hedge fund manager made some investments in private companies, and we're really happy to give you some shares in a private company, but good luck, never getting back your money again. Oh. So there were a lot of challenges in this respect. So my idea was, well, how can I help families really solve all these problems? We had Madoff, so there was fraud, so there were issues with due diligence. There were fund of funds that got paid twice. They got paid from the hedge funds that they invested with, and from the families that they're investors. So that's unethical on different levels. So you got to choose how you want to make your money, from the families or from the hedge funds. So my idea was, how do we solve it? And really the only solution to solve it is if you customize a portfolio for the families. So you really got to pick and choose the managers per family that's going to meet their risk reward profile, their liquidity needs. Let's look a more holistic approach, what other assets they own. And this the banks cannot offer. So that was the idea. And then through the years, as you build more trust and families get to know you more, the business really evolved into be an outsourced CIO type of business model. So looking at the overall portfolio and not just hedge funds. And really, for the families, it's really to have somebody who's an extension for them, who's it's not the banker, right? Like a family can work with a private bank. The problem that exists, and that's a conflict of interest that we cannot resolve, is that if you're an employee of the bank, then you get paid by JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or UBS, wherever it is. You don't get paid by the family. So you really are incentivized to sell the bank products, right? Like you don't have fiduciary responsibility to the families. And that's a big difference. And I think, as the years go by, families understand and appreciate it more. So there's 2 parts to what I do. One, there's the investment side, right, where you got to find the right managers. Think about asset allocation. Always look forward. How do we change what changes should we make to the portfolio? But then for me, there's a personal side of the business, right? Getting to know the families. Like I really care about them. I care about the patriarchs that made their wealth. I care about their kids. So it's for me, it's on 2 levels. It's the investment side and there's the personal side. So even though it is business, and my job is to make sure their wealth is protected and we're making money and generate attractive returns. But there's also the personal level. There's taking care, or there's the education of the kids, right? So one of the families I work with, they have 4 kids. They have 3 daughters that are in their 20s and the son who's 17. So you got to explain to them what's a stock, what's a bond, right? What's the difference? Why it's not attractive to invest today in a bond that gives you 2% yield. So I enjoy that part of teaching as well.
That's great to hear. Wow.
I involved with two non-for-profit organizations in New York City, and for one of them, it's called IAC, it's Israeli American Council, and we have an initiative called IAC Care, where we brought food to Holocaust survivors all this time when they were stuck at home. You can go. So we sent food to obviously hospitals and first responders and all that stuff, but also, every Friday, we would send food to people, they're obviously Holocaust survivors. They're living by themselves.
Oh, poor things. That's a noble thing to do. Just to, I mean, if they don't have much family left or whatever it might be, like that, it's important. It's a really important thing to do.
Yeah.
Cool. And having family in New York is very tough. How are you managing? How involved are you as a parent? How are you managing raising family, raising kids in New York City, and what it's been like since the pandemic started?
Yeah. So one, I think raising kids is tough regardless of where you are. Like, I don't think New York City is different from from Tel Aviv or Houston or Miami or whatever, LA or Ukraine. I don't know. I think in New York City, I mean, it's the greatest city in the world. I mean, I have Central Park as my backyard, right? We had all the museums to go to, all the theater, all the movies. I can't say it about our sports team. They're terrible. Maybe the Nets.
The Nets are looking pretty good.
The Knicks are looking good, but the Knicks have been terrible for years. Football has been horrific, and so maybe not there. But otherwise, when the kids were little, they're like 13 and 11 now. But then when they were babies, and if I needed milk at 10 o'clock at night, I walk down and I buy milk. I don't need to get in my car and drive 20 minutes to buy milk. So that makes it very easy. So I think that's, so with this, so I don't think it's different from any other place. And then how involved you are. I mean, you make time, right? You got to set priorities and you got to make time. For us, obviously, we've been working, from home for the last year. Now it's slowly starting to come back. It was a little bit more challenging when everybody's home and you need some quiet, but you get that. I mean, they were at school too. They were just in their room in front of their screens. And now they're back at school now. So thankfully that's getting better now. So like everything in life, you gotta prioritize and manage, and you find time. They say if you want to do something, if you want something to get done, you give it to a busy person, right? That's the way to do it.
Yeah. I guess, Elena, to your point about New York being a difficult place to raise children, I mean, I agree with your points too, Ronen. I guess, like, the convenience aspect. I think it's also a huge plus just to be in, like, a big city in terms of diversity and just, like, have your children exposed to different people from different walks of life. I guess maybe from a safety standpoint, or I guess there's just so much going on. Did you ever, like, worry about that, like, with your kids and with your family overall?
We were not. I mean, I don't. So I grew up in Israel. So I'm, in Israel it's mandatory to go to the military. So I'm a former special ops intelligence officer in the Israeli Airforce. So I spent 4 years in the Army and other 6 as reserve. So I think on a personal issue level, I'm a little bit less concerned. But it is a big city. So, obviously I'm not going to send my kids at 10 o'clock at night to walk by themselves. So maybe that you don't have the benefits of living in the suburbs, and maybe your kids are on their bicycle riding to their friend's house. So I guess that's the difference. But that's perfectly fine, and that's the choice we made for our family. So.
I understand that it's mandatory as an Israeli citizen, but I think that's just such an interesting experience to kind of build your career off of. And, like, I'm kind of curious, like, how is that? Well, first of all, how was that experience for you? Did you find it as a positive experience overall, or were there things maybe that you didn't like about it as much? And how has that affected you, as an individual today?
Sure. Well, first of all, so I had a great experience in my military service. At a very young age, when you're 18, right, you get exposed. Once you get a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, so that's great. It's very different from 18-year-old kid who goes to his first year in college and his biggest responsibility is, well, I have to do my laundry by myself today or this week. But you learn, so you get responsibility, you learn importance of teamwork. In my particular job, I was special ops, so obviously, I enjoyed doing that. You learn to work under deadlines. You learn there's no such thing as no can do, right? You learn if you start away and you hit a wall, then you go around the wall from the right, from the left, from above, from below. There's always a path, and that kind of trains you. From what I did, it always tell me, in intelligence, you always got to cross-check information, which is a little bit similar to what I do today in my job, in my due diligence part. So that's kind of the same approach that now I've been doing for almost 30 years. So.
Wow, that's so cool. Like, that's your edge right there. Because the toughest place to fly out of is definitely Tel Aviv, without a doubt. However many questions you get asked from every point. And they ask the same question several times, sometimes slightly differently phrased. And when I refuse and I say, "Oh, you just asked me the question," they're like, "Ma'am, just answer the question."
Yeah, I guess I would never. Yeah, they can be tough sometimes. I know.
If that's what the caliber of due diligence you're putting your managers through.
It all makes sense.
Like, nothing can sneak in.
That's very true. You can't afford it. You can't afford it. Laugh aside, but it's true. Like, I cannot afford to have a fraud, right? Like, that's a very big no-no for me, right? Like, it's really, I cannot afford to do that. So.
Ronen, what is special ops in the Air Force? Like, I thought Air Force is already like a special ops somehow. So, how does it work together?
So special operations can mean, there's different things. A lot of them is, you try to gather intelligence about different places, and in order to do that, sometimes you need to put a certain camera, let's say, somewhere that will take a picture of the place. So you have to have soldiers there has to be a person, human being, that plant that camera on that mountain. So the Israeli Air Force has a special unit that's their job, to go and put that camera. In order to create that exercise, to put that camera, there's a lot of intelligence work behind it. You got to learn, well, how are you going to climb that mountain? Where are you going to, is it an area that's very crowded with people? Is it in the middle of the desert? Like, there's a lot of work to be done around it. And that's really so there's a lot of planning behind. And then there's the ongoing monitoring. As the event takes place, we were monitoring them, right? Making sure that there's no enemy coming close to them. And then you got to make sure they come back home alive, right? That's the success of the mission. So it's kind of similar to what I do with investing, right? There's the due diligence, which is the planning part. There's the ongoing monitoring, we're talking with the managers once we're invested. And then there's the time to redeem. And that's the exit, right? We said, okay, this was a great investment and we had a great run, but I don't think long-short credit is going to be attractive anymore in the next 2 or 3 years. So let's give me my money back and let's redeploy it someplace else.
I love this analogy. This is the moneymaker for me right here.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
'Cause
Yeah, like give the job to the Israeli
yeah, like it
intelligence
just makes so much
officer.
That's right.
sense, and I can totally see like why
Yes.
you wouldn't want to be presumptuous about it and like maybe like bring it up to all of your clients, but to me it seems like a huge selling point. And so, yeah, I mean, all one has to do is check your LinkedIn, and boom, there it is.
And especially when you do it at such a young age, so like your formative years, that's what you're trained to do,
Right.
like in your sleep, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing you learn in the army, not to sleep too much.
Well, there's, it's also the case for MBA,
Different reason.
but for slightly different
Slightly different
reasons.
reason. You're saying the army is a good preparation for Wharton. That's okay.
So Ronen, what prepared you to be successful at Wharton?
That's my military years. There's no doubt. It's lack of sleep.
Do you ever go back and do you see your teammates?
Yeah, of course. So until pandemic, I go to Israel twice a year on average, and keep in touch with some of my unit friends and other friends. So, yeah, we definitely get together. So even though, yeah, so that's the other great things, right? Kind of similar to Wharton, you make friends for life. And that's the really nice thing about it.
Wow. And do you miss Israel right now since it's been?
Yeah, it's been 2 years since I visited. So I'm going in June. So I'm excited about it. So
That's great. That's great to
Oh,
hear.
cool.
but it is easy. Because the world, as we know, right, in Zoom and FaceTime, it's easier. It's not as hard as it was, 20 years ago. But yeah, it's definitely not the same as being there.
What do you miss the most?
Oh, the food.
Oh,
Food, the beach, the Mediterranean. There's a lot of, and obviously friends and family.
that goes without saying. That goes without saying.
Of course.
So Ronen, yeah, you mentioned how you started with the one client that actually wanted you to move to London, and your family said no. But so it started with one great client, but like now you have various clients, I presume. What was that like, kind of growing from just one single client to now many?
Yeah. So you know what they say, the harder you work, the luckier you get. So there's no shortcuts here. There's a lot of networking and talking to as many people as you can, talking at conferences. I've been, quoted at The Economist, on Bloomberg, on Reuters, on every U.S. news, everywhere, to kind of build the brand name, right? Because we started, not too many people know you.
Right.
And then, so there's a lot of that, and then then at some point you start to getting referrals from your existing clients. So if you do a good job and they trust you, and they value your work, then they'll be happy to refer you to their friends. So that's kind of my path, and that's. Yeah, and that's, again, it's never ending. It's keep doing it.
Let me push my tech agenda here a little bit now. We've been talking a lot about markets, and I haven't heard you say anything about crypto. And I know, a bona fide Wharton finance guy might just scoff. But I'm curious because I think over the years we've seen it kind of play a bigger and bigger role. Retail investing aside, what do you think what role do you see crypto playing in the future? Do you think it has a place to stay? Do you see it as a fad? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Crypto will stay. I don't see it disappearing right now, right? Like the size and scope of it. I think what's really interesting is to start to look. So there's Bitcoin, right, that we all know about. But it's too volatile as a currency. Like, how do you transact? How do you buy something when it's worth $49,000 today, but it was $60,000 a week
Absolutely.
ago? So that makes it very, very difficult. But that's to stay. The amount of money that's coming to the sector, to the crypto universe, just makes it. I think, and I can be 100% wrong, that it's going to here to stay. So what's more interesting, I think, is the blockchain technology behind it, right? That's the next level. And with that, obviously, there are different tokens and some tokens. So you got to find, there's the real companies behind it with real technology. There's real innovation that will make things better. So you can think, Solana is going to be better than Ethereum, I think, right? Like there are different. So that's an area where we're dipping our toes in these days, and we do it. There's two ways to play it, either through, in managers. You can do the managers that just play the tokens. But for us, it's important they also have like a venture arm where they actually do their research and they understand the technology behind it and why this makes sense to invest in. But that's tiny. That's today maybe 1%, 2% of the portfolios. It's really, it's high risk, high reward, obviously. And every family is different and everybody has different risk appetite. And the 82-year gentleman is very different, from the 40-year-old guys that sold their company for 109 and, they're still looking to grow and grow. So that's important as well. Like what am I solving for each family? But I think at this point in time, it seems like crypto is probably here to stay. I still don't know what's probably is a trading vehicle. It'll be interesting to see what happens when the Chinese are going to launch their own digital currency. But it's still, I don't see it. It's not going to move so fast to replace the US dollar, right? The Mexican peso or whatever.
Yeah, that was something that I was thinking as a follow-up question to ask you. Would you ever see it as something that replaces? I mean, talking about Mexican peso and some of the Latin American, South America, or just in general developing countries where they have this crazy instability of just printing money, and Argentina's hit bad as one to note. But there's been many. Like there is a big argument in favor of having something that's completely decentralized. Do you see that kind of taking place anywhere in the world at some point, or do you think government's always going to have their control?
Well, it's happening already, right? So, if we think of Latin America, so maybe not Mexico, but Venezuela. Like we live in the US and I kind of think dollar, but you're absolutely right. In Venezuela, people like whatever their regime and their currency, you're better off buying some crypto that appreciates in value, especially against the dollar, and that helps protect whatever you have. Same thing, countries in Africa, right? Like whatever countries that had their, whatever hundreds of % of inflation in the past, that's a good way for them to protect themselves. So in this regard, there's definitely value for them. Just looking here from the U.S., and the U.S. is the currency of the world, right? And everybody's kind of, I don't say afraid, at some level. I don't think it's going to happen any day soon that the dollar will stop being the currency of the world, but it could happen down the road.
Cut into the chase. Do you own any Bitcoin? And do you intend to hold it?
Yeah, of course. We're like tiny Bitcoin.
Ronen, when you essentially your job is actually not just execute yourself, but you have to pick people who will execute on the mandate you're choosing, right? So that's you have even less control than as if you were doing it yourself.
Right.
So how are you choosing your managers, numbers aside?
Sure. So I always say I'm in the people's business, either my clients or the managers that I pick and invest in. So, part of the diligence is, there's I would say there's 3 P's. There's it's people, performance, and their portfolio. So people, as I said, even either a hedge fund, a venture capital fund, a long-only manager, at the end of the day, there's a person that's going to do the trades for us, right? He's going to buy and sell the stocks. So there has to be a level of comfort and confidence and trust with him. So that's number 1, right? So I'm learning about his pedigree and his track record and what led him, his path to what led him to launch his fund. So that's the key. Who else is working with him? like his team, how long have they been working together? So these are things that are important. Then there's the strategy, the process. Is it repeatable? Right? Is it a concentrated portfolio? And has he kept it, the same, like his portfolio? If somebody says, well, I'm a concentrated manager in 10 stocks, has that really been the case, through the years? Or maybe it's 10 today, but it was at 20 a few years ago. Or maybe he started at 10, and as he grew his assets, he decided, well, I'm going to, grow my portfolio too. Instead of 10 stocks, it's going to be 20 stocks. So there's a lot of work on that. And then there's the operational due diligence, which is really important because for me, my biggest risk is my reputation. In other words, if I recommend a fund that's a fraud, right? If I don't find a fraud in my due diligence process, then I'm out of business, right? Because I recommend a fraud, I miss something in my work. So I lose that trust with my clients. So operational due diligence is a really important part, and that's really confirming the story that they're telling me, but on the operational side too. So make sure that the assets that they say they have really exist. Make sure there's an independent administrator who's involved in the money wiring. Looking at their audited financial statements. Like everything, I got to check the boxes to make sure that we're comfortable to invest with that person. And then there's the monitoring, right? So to your point of, I'm not the one who's trading, but we're going to continue to monitor those managers. So that means, we're going to talk to them every month or quarter and see how they performed and how they made money, how the business is growing, and how are they positioned for the future. Because with managers, it's always, looking at the future, right? Like equity long short is great today, but maybe in a year or 6 months, it's not going to be as attractive. Maybe US is, very compelling today, but next year, if taxes are going to, increase and we're going to be, the economy is going to do better, then the year-over-year comps are going to be more challenging. And maybe we want to, reduce our exposure a little bit and move money someplace else. So it's always forward-looking, and which is what I enjoy in what I do. But that's a really important factor of the job.
But the history is kind of limited, so there's only so much due diligence you can do, right? So how do you make sure that A, they haven't been just lucky so far, and B, that operationally speaking, that it's not just an elaborate scam.
Yeah, of course.
The new Madoff in the making.
Yeah, I know. So on the investment due diligence side, so there are a few ways. One, do a lot of reference calls about that manager, right? Especially if it's a new guy that just started his fund, right? So we'll talk to other people that he worked for in the past, right? If it's somebody that used to work at Millennium, then we'll get reference calls with Millennium people who knew him. If we worked at a bigger hedge fund before, we'll talk to the people that sat next to him and learn from and hear from them, right? Is the story make sense? Is it true? We want to learn about the personality. Is it trustworthy person, or is he kind of crazy? Is he blaming everybody? He's the one who's making the money, but whenever there's a loss, it's everybody else, right? So we want to learn that. Let's talk about your biggest positions in your portfolio today, right? Like, what's your top 3 positions? And let's go. Like, when did you invest? How did you source the idea? What due diligence work did you do? How did you build your position? You bought it all at once, or you start over time, you do more work, you get more comfortable. And there's no right or wrong answer, but you want to hear that they actually know what they're doing. And obviously, I've been allocating to managers for 12, 13 years now. So the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? There's a lot of experience to do. So that's on the investment. And we can monitor them for a while, right? Just because I met a manager today in April doesn't mean, we're going to invest with him in May. I very much probably will wait, 3, 4, 6 months, see him perform and talk to him 2 more times along the way. And maybe I'm going to watch also these top 3 names I'm going to put on my screen and see how they perform. So when we speak again, 4 or 6 weeks from today, I'm going to ask him, well, how did your position do? How did that stock perform? And what did you do? Did you increase the size? Did you exit? Like, what worked? What didn't work? What did you miss in your research, perhaps? So all these things give you the level of comfort that this is the right guy. On the operational side, so other than a whole different set of conversations with the COO, CFO of the fund, we're going to talk to the administrator of the hedge fund. And I want to hear the exact same answers from them as the CFO telling me. And I want to get those in writing too, because that's my insurance policy. So if I have in writing from the administrator of the hedge fund, the assets under management as of the end of March 31st, 2021 was 100 million. That's what the manager told me, then I'm good. If the manager told me, no, we're at 500, but then they say it's only 100, I'm like, oh, okay. Why is that? Like, why is that gap? And if we're not satisfied with the answer, then we're not going to invest. But to get that confirmation from the administrator, the assets are there, that the assets are correct, that they value their portfolio independently, that they're involved with wiring money, right? Because that's the risk, that one day we're going to wake up, not just the Madoff that the money wasn't there, but maybe they wired the money somewhere and ran away, right? We just had that, talk about crypto, but in Turkey, this just happened 2 days ago when a Turkish crypto manager disappeared with billions of dollars, and maybe that's why crypto is like this.
Yeah. Doesn't invite the people with the highest character all the time.
Yes. But I got to have that in writing. So I want to hear, from the administrator in writing, they're involved. They're the one who's signing off on each money wire, and the manager can just send the money wherever he wants. And that's really get us to the level of comfort that this is the right guy. And, we talk about fraud, and, fraud is a big spectrum of fraud from, it can be inside trading, like we had in different funds that, did it for whatever reason. But then you as a family get your money back, right? It's not, the money is still there. They just made gains that they shouldn't have made, but the fund unwinds and you get your money back, all the way through Madoff, where he made it up and maybe the money's gone. But the frauds happens at the very big hedge funds too. It's not like a risk that's tailored only to the small emerging guys. If you look through history, it's really the giant funds, right, that have these issues. So just because it's somebody who's smaller, it doesn't mean he has a higher risk of being a fraud or a liar.
Do you see any diversity, or do you see diversity increasing among fund managers?
Not yet, not really. I mean, it's still that's reality. I mean,
Still white guys? Still white males?
It's still white males predominantly, yeah. I mean, even though, I think the record of female portfolio managers is higher, is better than the male. Wall Street for the most part is still, a male, men type of industry. I hope it changes. It's always good to have diversity. It's good to have different views about things. But so far, if I think about, the hundreds of calls we have every year, it's still 95% is with men and less with women.
Yeah, and racial?
Racial?
Racial distribution?
Yeah, it's still predominantly white. There's no...
Wow.
That's just reality. What can I do?
I was hoping to, because we are Humans of Wharton podcast, and we did talk a little bit about like having the Wharton discount. But I do, I want to take it, it's a little bit anachronistic, but I think the viewers would maybe appreciate too. Like I'm personally very curious about your Wharton experience. So take me back to your days as an MBA. I guess like what do you like really remember from your experience from Wharton? Like what really sticks out from your experience at Wharton?
Yeah. Well, there are so many. I mean, it's really, one of the best 2 years of my life. For us, we were the first class to study in Huntsman Hall. So to come to a building that was brand new, there was Wi-Fi in every room, screens up and down. It was like, really like we landed on Mars, right? Like, what is this? So, that was amazing. Obviously, always there are some of the faculty and classes that kind of stick with you and that, enjoyed a lot because it is a school. Thursday night pub, right? I mean, that was also a lot of fun. Always being in classroom, surrounded by smart people, probably most of them smarter than I am.
That's fantastic to hear. Obviously, you still keep in touch with Elena. Do you feel like you still have like a lot of people, like maybe like your core group from the Wharton days that like you still keep in contact with, or even like in your career to this point, like have you really been able to utilize that Wharton network and that Wharton community to grow yourself in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one is like on the social level, right? You remain friends with those that you became the closest, right, during those years. So there's that part. On the career part, what is helpful to me. So we still have, it's called a Wharton Hedge Fund Network group in New York City. And pre-COVID, we used to meet like 3-4 times a year, and every time was a different speaker and different topic. So that was a great place for me to kind of meet people and meet new potential managers to invest with, but also see old friends and kind of compare notes on some industry issues and manager specific issues. So that's been very helpful to me. I think also through the years, I got into there were a bunch of Wharton people that kind of reached out to me asking for some career advice and help. I'm always happy to talk to and tell them what I think. I don't know if it helped, but I was happy to talk to them.
That's great to hear that the Wharton network, and I mean, I can't say I'm surprised, right? Especially in this space. I feel like it's such a, Wharton is so prolific with its graduates in the hedge fund and just Wall Street in general space. And then you mentioned too the pubs on Thursday night. I'm curious, which pubs did you frequent on Thursdays in Philly?
We had pub at school. The pub at school. So there was, I don't even know. I don't think there was a name for it, but for the MBAs there was pub.
Oh, it was from the school. Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, at school. You get beer, you get pizza. Like life is great. What else do you need?
Yeah, we didn't have to go anywhere at all.
Right. Make it easy.
MBAs had it so good.
That's before Uber Eats. That's before DoorDash. We had pub at school. I mean, genius.
Yeah, and Chris Most managed it.
There you go.
And made sure there was never shortage of either beer or pizza.
That's perfect life.
Yeah. MBA life was great.
It sure was.
That was just kind of funny, like kind of dichotomy. Like in Huntsman, you walk through the hallways. Oh, that's clearly an MBA right there,
And Ronen's hard work stopped at taking GMAT twice.
Once you're in business,
and grades didn't matter, right?
Right. Grades not disclosure. Yeah. Hey, that's.
I guarantee you, his first GMAT was maybe like 710, and he was like, "Oh no, I have to retake it to make sure it's 750."
While we're on the topic of Wharton, something that we have been kind of hit or miss with and asking our guests, but we do like to ask this question, is complete the sentence. Wharton is a place where...
you can be whatever you want to be.
Oh, nice. Yep. And for you came into Wharton, you wanted to work on Wall Street, bam, there it is.
There you go, 2 years later. It only took 2 years and 1 year of applying, so yeah.
Well, Vernon, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Great conversation.
Yeah. Great initiative. Hey, good luck with it. This human of Wharton, I love it.
Thank you so much for being here with us, Ronen.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for tuning in. And remember to subscribe.
That's right. Don't forget.
Until next time.